Hey everybody, it's Glenn Asher, the title guy. I have a special guest for our next podcast today. As you see, Mr. Brian Scott Cohen from Guarantee Rate. Brian is one of the top bankers in the nation year after year, and a good friend, a trusted confidant, someone who's an industry leader. Humility is his middle name. Brian and I have gone back since 2002. We started out in the industry together. Brian was, I was doing title, and obviously, and Brian worked over at AmeriQuest, and that's where we met. And I was his first title guy, and here we are 20 years later, still doing business together, still working together, still friends. And now instead of being a loan officer and somebody who just got in the business, Brian is one of the top lenders in the country year after year, and I'm the top title guy in the country residentially. So a lot of knowledge, a lot of closings, a lot of volume between us. I'd like to welcome Brian. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Glenn, thanks for having me. A pleasure to get to spend some time with you, and lucky enough for everybody watching, I get to pick your brain a little bit as Florida market and New York markets keep changing, and I want to be up to date, and people out there should know the difference between New York transactions, Florida transactions, and just what you're seeing out there. Really is I'm super curious.
Sure. So thanks, Brian. And there are a lot of differences. I was able to be fortunate enough to leave my business model the way it is and continue to grow both expansively, horizontally, which means hire more people, grow this way. And also as you grow horizontally, you have to grow vertically. So I always promote within. I'm a big believer in it. Edison, my assistant, who's been with me for over a decade, kind of got moved up as my director of operations. I hired him an assistant, Alondra, who's able to, and she's bilingual, and she knows Florida and nationwide, so she's able to kind of grow. And it's this time where it slowed down a little bit. We all needed, I think, the industry kind of crushed everyone. If in 2001 through COVID, fortunately we had, knock wood, some of the best rates available. Things have changed quite drastically, and it's kind of shaken the tree. New York and Florida are still, busy markets compared to some other places in the country. I mean, Texas is super busy, and then, on the East Coast, I see a lot of business right now in South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee. I just closed out the Four Seasons condo development there. Condo hotels, a $400 million sellout.
Wow.
And we just closed our last deal yesterday. And now kudos to us because we're now the choice title company for the Four Seasons moving forward. Good hard work.
Amazing. You're everywhere. I honestly didn't realize that you cover such big ground, right? I thought you were only New York, Florida, but nice to hear that you're everywhere. Super helpful for the future.
Yeah, and what I did was I was the guinea pig, right? I'm the guy who came down before COVID, before it was crazy, before, it was still busy, but you still had the wave of foreign investors here, cash deals, and then lending deals down here. And then, unlike yourself, and listen, I have nothing against New Yorkers, obviously. That's where I built my career and was most of my life. The comparison is that people don't take people seriously down here pre-COVID if you didn't dedicate yourself to wanting to be here full time. And that's what I saw. And then as COVID hit and more people started working from home, the acceptance of having, quote unquote foreign, meaning New Yorkers coming down here, and in the Floridian sides, taking all their business kind of thing. And you notice there's an honest trend, right? So the trend is look at the real estate because everything follows that. Eklund Gomes, the top team in the country. Now, Frederick, and down here we have a joint venture with Douglas Elliman. So I do all the title work for Elliman down here. But you see the trend is that the industry leaders are committing to coming here. Frederick and John moving here, and now Julia coming here seasonally, the CEO, and then Ryan Serhan obviously bringing his brand with a little more a vengeance this time down to South Florida, and you have a lot of New York brands coming down here on a high level, as well as bankers. So Brian, you do ridiculous amounts of business. You're what industry vendors call a life changer, right? You have a machine behind you, kind of like I do, and I appreciate your hard work. And building the machine and maintaining the machine is just as important as getting business in, because your process is got to be perfect, and I feel the same way about my stuff, because I dedicate a lot of time to making sure that process works for everyone. And I know that you work for your team like I do. So tell us a little bit about your plans to expand down to Florida and start building business before I get into the particulars of deals.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm licensed right now in 9 states, but majority of my business has always been kind of New York City, Westchester, Connecticut, Hamptons, kind of New York metropolitan areas, Jersey. I've been licensed in Florida for a while. During COVID, I mean, everybody was moving everywhere, right? They were moving from Manhattan to Connecticut, from Manhattan to Florida, from Florida to Florida, from everywhere to everywhere. But we did see a large amount of my client base, which I've been doing this for 19 years. We saw a large amount of my clients in book of business buy second homes, primary homes, third homes in Florida. And me personally own a home in Florida, so I actually got to spend a good amount of time in Florida. And I've met a lot of great people that I've started to do business with. And I love the market and the opportunity. And that's just not specifically Miami. So Miami, I love Miami, don't get me wrong, but also other areas where people are financing a little bit more. So New York City, Miami are very cash heavy kind of purchase areas. I'm in the lending money business, so I need people to borrow money. So I'm looking at areas in Florida where there's more transactions, the Tampa, the Jacksonville,
Sure.
St. Augustine markets, Orlando, where there's a lot of transactions, and we're super competitive in that space. So we're spending time there. I'm growing the team, and super excited about it.
Yeah, so I feel the same way. For me, I have a lot of consumer direct buyers that buy cash, and Miami is repeat customers. I laugh about it, but I do a lot of business in Surfside with the New York Jewish community that passes my name around, and it's all cash most of the deals, and it's usually Jed, I got your number from Joel, and he says that you're the best, and then what I try to do is as the investors come down, if they're buying as a second home or they're buying as an investment property, I always talk about being able to cash out of that while the appraisals are up. And that's where I always refer business. A lot of people say, Glenn, how much, you do so much business, so many transactions, like, how do you do everything compliantly? I said, I leverage business the best I could. People trust me, and I work with real people. Brian Cohen is the realest that they get, like in the mortgage industry. And I work with not only him, but I work with other people that do different things. Brian happens to be great, but he can't do everything. Brian, what are your sweet spots? And what is the affinity? Yeah. Does the affinity program, I know people have questions about this, does the affinity program mean anything?
So I think the affinity is just a division of the company within a parent company. So parent company is guaranteed rate. And there's divisions under guaranteed rate. There's guaranteed rate affinity, there's proper rate, there is origin point. There's a lot of different divisions. So I think I'm in a smaller division with a parent company and kind of have great flexibility and the ability to kind of run my own show within the company.
Gotcha.
The way that I would look at it. And I like to think we almost do everything, right? Is the bottom line. I think that I come from the big bank background. I was at a big bank for 15 years. It was a great experience and loved it. And I left at the height of the pandemic to have more options. I tell people all the time I'm a yes man. And I like to say yes to customers, right? So if you go to the big banks and you need a foreign national loan, most don't do foreign national loans, right? It's a niche product. Same thing, clients that need to do bank statement programs or DSCR loans, which are debt service ratio. A lot of the big banks,
which is a great loan right now.
It is a great loan. And a lot of people just think, hey, I'm going to go to my bank, right? Everyone has their bank, and a lot of the banks don't have these programs. It's kind of niche companies like the guaranteed rates that have access to multiple different products. And I think we're really good at it. I think the space where we, maybe are not the most competitive or we say we lose is just people that have, tons of money at a certain institution and they get relationship discounts. And
Sure.
that's great. But sometimes they can't fund and the rate can be great. But at the end of the day, it's about closing the loan and getting the customer to have a good experience. So I love to talk to everybody as the bottom line. And if I can't do it, I always point the customers in the right directions. And that's why it's so important, Glenn, like in your business, same as my business, is to know other people in the industry, know what you can do and can't do. And if you can't do it, know who's good at it and who you can refer out, just so you make sure the customer has a good experience.
That's always been my thing. Certain people fall into certain parameters. And listen, when the rates are down, there's a lot more leverage, right? Like there's a lot more people in the game, and I can leverage more business that way. I get more phone calls. Hey, Glenn, I bought 2 years ago. I need to refi. Who should I go with? That kind of thing. And I pre-qual people after all these years, and find out, are they W-2? Are they self-employed? Are they full doc? Are they, do they need a non-QM? Which takes us to products in Florida, Brian, and let's talk about condos, right? So the co-ops in Florida are few and far between, at least in South Florida, and most of my business that I do outside of Orlando and Tampa and St. Petersburg and some Naples, most are in the Southeast, and I'm the top agent here, and we're doing new developments now, which I'm super excited about, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the condo market sucks. Like it's very, very hard, and it didn't make it easier with the 40-year cert issues in Surfside. That made it more difficult. Then you got Fannie and Freddie. They have different guidelines, right? One you could submit and have an appraisal. One you don't need an appraisal. It's very difficult, and I don't like. And I'll be honest, as a title company now, I can't waste my time on a transaction that's bound towards litigation because the banker doesn't know what the hell they're doing. And I feel that bankers should feel the same way about title companies that know how to get deals closed and balance CDs and stuff like that. And you know what? Unfortunately, there was a lot of fluff in this business in the last couple of years, and that fluff has to go because they're causing problems and they're causing consumers to not trust the process. So, the bait and switch. Well, why are you giving I'm just using a number, why are you giving a 4.5 rate on something that's never going to be approved at 4.5? It's going to have to go non-QM, right? And it's going to have or a spot approval, and now you're going to add a 1.5 to that.
Yeah.
Tell us about
I think
that,
I think the problem is, Glenn, you make a very good point, right? There's a ton of new development in the Miami areas and New York City. People don't realize that 50% of the approval is the building, right? They just think that, I found this lender on the internet and their rate is much prettier than yours. But then they come back 4 weeks later and say, oops, they can't lend in the building, right? So I think working with people who understand the issues and figuring out a way and funding opportunities for the building itself is very important. If you go to a new construction building, you'll always see a preferred lender list and vendor list, right? So for your mortgage people, for your title people, for your attorneys, and they're there for a reason. They're there to help streamline the process. And in Florida, it was like two-ish years ago, the building collapsed, right? And that kind of just made lending even harder, right? It's a more rigorous process, and there's different guidelines in Florida financing on condos than there is in New York. And certain lenders have different guidelines for down payments in Florida than they do in New York. Interest rates are different in Florida than they are in New York. So I think it's all about knowing the local markets and understanding the differences between them. And the hard part is telling a customer your rate's higher because of the building when they don't understand that, or they call another place that says, oh, yeah. And then, again, weeks, months later, they come back and say, oops, I can't do it.
Well, just so you know, and I try not to downplay lenders, and I know everybody works hard, and if they know what they're doing, then it shouldn't be an issue. But when I get a contract and I speak to the buyers, and I'm like, who is the lenders and where are they from? If they say that they're like a local bank in Chicago that's lending guidelines, because that's where their money is, and that's their local bank is where they normally go to, I'm going to tell them right off the bat that I think you're making a big mistake, and I'll tell you why. because they don't know anything. Call them. I guarantee you, they tell you the truth. If they don't know anything about Florida, I will make an introduction. And I don't like to jump in and steal business from anyone, but I know that it's going to affect the consumer. As soon as I talk to the banker, in 2 seconds, I'll know. Because all I have to ask him is the condo warrantable? Are you portfolioing it? You know, and if they say, what, you didn't get the condo questionnaire yet? So you quoted a 4% rate, it's going to be 7%. And you're not going to be able to close at the same LTV, which means that they're going to have to come up with more money out of pocket. Like, you know, these are the things that working with experienced bankers over time, I've learned and I incorporate into my discussions. You know, I speak to buyers, and I think it's really important, even for gentlemen like yourself and myself at a high level who do a lot of volume. I speak to every single buyer and seller in a transaction at one point or another. Usually in the beginning, usually, you know, I'm not an attorney, so I'll tell you the difference in the closing process. So down here, this is a title state, not an attorney state. New York, on the other hand, when you are during a New York purchase transaction, how many people are involved? You have the bank, the lender, the lender's counsel or the bank attorney. You have the title company and their representative at the closing table, which is the title closer, right? We have now the buyer's attorney, we have the seller's attorney, and then possible an agent on each side. It's a small soccer team. Like, you know, in Florida, a purchase transaction does not have to go through counsel. They're as-is deals, which means that you cannot mark up the contract. They don't mark up contracts in Florida. They do addendums or additional comments, and those additional comments or addendums are listed in the contract, which, by the way, just changed. We'll get back to that in a second. In Florida, but you know, the process is totally different. So the relationship dealing with in Florida on a purchase with a bank and a title agent is very important, because we have to balance, we have to fund. You know, I don't, you know, truth be told is, I don't care about the real estate agent in the transaction, because they're not really doing much once, you know, as far as numbers go and far as interaction goes. It's more verbal, it's more, you know, discussing deals, discussing issues that could possibly happen, you know, talking about addendums if need be. But, you know, the contracts down here are 30 to 45 days. They're not 90 days like New York with the time of the essence of another 30 days. Here, the contract date is the contract date. If you don't extend it and both parties don't sign off, it's done. So that's a big thing.
Yeah, New York's very different. New York is always an on or about typical closing date. Sometimes it's a hard date, but usually it's an on or about date. And it's very different when we're lending in Florida. It's, you know, I need a 30-day rate lock. In New York, it's like, what do you mean it's only 90 days, right? And it used to be, with the lender. The lender's not ready. Now we have more capacity than ever. We're the first ones ready in 99% of the transactions. And we're typically waiting for management companies or just people have certain dates they want to close. But it's no longer people waiting for the lender anymore. The lenders are ready, and all these different opportunities to close quick. I mean, guaranteed rate. We have a same day mortgage option where we can clear someone to close within 24 hours. I mean, it's incredible. No one needs that, but it's available for, you know, for people who qualify. It's available. So modern mortgages, guys, it's out there. But Glenn, let me ask you a question. So in New York, we always get questions: condos, co-ops, closing costs. In New York, there's mansion tax. Is there a mansion tax in Florida?
No.
No mansion tax.
No mansion tax. So taxes in Florida are not much different than New York. When you do a purchase and you take a purchase money mortgage or a refinance, you're going to pay two types of taxes. You're going to pay doc stamps, which is 0.35% of the loan amount. You're then going to pay intangible tax. That's 0.2%. So the total mortgage tax, quote unquote, as they say in New York, is 0.55%. Now that's a lot cheaper than some areas. Long Island is 0.8, right? And yep. The boroughs is 1.8. And then it goes higher in certain places. Westchester's a little higher in certain counties. But for the most part, it's under 2%. In Florida, it's 0.55%. Now, interestingly enough, if you're a New Yorker and you're refinancing or even buying, you do something called a SEMA. Brian, what is a SEMA?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a consolidation extension modification agreement, and what that means in English is we assign the tax you already paid on your loan to your new loan. You can do that on the refinance, and you can do it on the purchase. So basically, mortgage tax is one of the biggest closing costs on a condo or a house, call it New York City. And that if you pay the tax once, you can assign it going forward to a loan if you refinance, or if you have a buyer and you're selling it, you can even assign it to the future buyer's mortgage to save them money on closing costs. So you just got to know what you're doing. CMAs are super important.
So in Florida, you can, well, they haven't done purchase CMAs down here. I have done CMAs on refis, and about 6 years ago, I basically went all the way up the food chain to the Department of Financial Services, head of taxation, to question the legislature, and I was right. And 6 years later, they admitted it, and this year, the banking department in Florida put a seminar, a full-day seminar, on how intangible tax could be saved on refinancing with the same lender. There are parameters. I figured it out 6 years ago, and nobody wanted to believe me. And I have, all kinds of documentation. I've been doing intangible tax savings with private banks down here, and international private banks that I do business with for 6 years, saving consumers thousands and thousands of dollars. Not one kickback as far as from the county, from the taxes. Oh, you didn't pay enough taxes. No issues. Houses bought and sold. I just, I read the legislature. I figured it out, and I implemented it, with the lenders that would allow me to. Unfortunately, a lot of lenders are lazy and don't want to look back, and they don't care. And I wasn't trying to hurt the county. I was about to lose the county a lot of money if big banks would pick up on it, because truth be told is, it's a competitive market out there. Brian, talked about relationship pricing. I know Brian gives par rates. Like, he has great rates in the market. He doesn't pad his stuff. That's not his business model. Just like me, I charge very low closing costs. In Florida, talk about closing costs. We charge $5.95 to close. That's it. Wow. And that includes the notary fee. So I've seen attorneys in New York charging $2,000, $2,500 to close a deal, and then you pay the notary fee, on the side on top of it. I never believed in that. For us, I do volume. I want repeat business. I want Brian's refinance business, so Brian knows that I have the cheapest closing costs. If he uses a title company that charges $12.50 to close, and I charge $5.95, well, that's a $7.50 savings when he's calculating the bottom line and how much his consumer is getting back, and then giving a reissue rate and being able to stay lean on the title bills. That's something I do. I use one vendor since I've been down here for all my lien searches. I use one survey company for the most part, and I use two underwriters, and that's it. And I'm very, very, very loyal to my vendors. That's what I get what I want. That's why, at the end of the day, when I make a phone call, I'm not calling bluff. Brian, I'm sure that's the way you have it with your credit team, and it has to be that way to function at the level that we function. How many apps you taking in a day? On a September, October, afternoon. Not anything crazy in the market.
Yeah, it's tough. Every day is a little bit different. I would say, like, peak of the market, we'd be doing, I would say, around 250 a month. And I would say in slow months, we're doing 30 a month. So really, really big range. But let's just say a few a day for sure.
Right. So humble Brian, once again, has an assembly line that looks like the Tesla factory. And you know what? The truth is that people come back to him. People come back to us because they know they're going to get the service that they deserve and they're paying for. And I believe in that. And I believe in working with the top people. And I believe in keeping the closing costs low and being able to explain them. I have an app that's downloadable right on my website, right on my signature block, that Florida realtors use to calculate closing costs. And all people use. Brian, to buy a house in Florida, you go right on my app, you can put in all the title fees, and it happens real time. It's very simple.
Awesome.
It really works. Check, Brian, I'll send it to you separate with a link, but yeah. I keep it right on my phone.
You should put it on this thing too, by the way, just so people have it. I think it'd be super useful just so you have an idea, a rough estimate of what closing costs are.
Oh, it's an amazing tool. You know, I give it to listing agents too. You know, when they go on a listing appointment, what do people want to know? They want to know how much they're going to make, right? How much am I walking away with? I'm selling my house for $1 million. How much am I walking away with? So you could literally go on the phone and do it right there. You put in the price, you put in the mortgage payoffs, the HOAs, it automatically prorates taxes based on your inputted data. You press calculate, and then you could download it, you could save it. So you're like, yeah, if I sell it for 1.2 and you give me all the numbers, here's what you're gonna make when you walk away. It's an invaluable tool, and
it's amazing.
And you know, in times like this when it's slow, me and Brian talked about it offline. It's important to keep people around because it's going to get busy again. And you know, sometimes when we have, and Brian I know has long-time employees that have worked with him, and so do I. You know, I'm not one to want to let people go and then rehire and retrain, and you know, but give me your loyalty and I'll take your freedom.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not easy times right now in this market. You know, number of transactions are down, inventory is down, but I think both you and I both have great teams, and you know, we've been both doing this for 20 years. It's a long time, and I think that I'm a big believer in always doing the right thing. Right? There's never one loan that I just want to do so bad that it's worth any kind of risk, or I'm never going to make enough money off one customer that I can, do something different. It's all about helping people one at a time and doing the right thing. And I think just surround yourself with great people and people in the industry that you trust, that you like to work with. And I think that, that's what it's all about.
And that's a proven concept. You know, Brian is a big name in the industry. He caused shockwaves like across the country. There were shockwaves felt, but Brian is a calculated guy and a very bright individual and a family guy, and he's a hard worker, man. I'll put him up with in my category of guys that really get down to the grind and really put it in. And Brian, I watched him from writing his first loan until now, and he has done the same with me. And it's always a pleasure to kick it with somebody of Brian's stature. And Brian really does the right thing. He's one of my referral sources. Not every deal works out, but at the end of the day, you have to work with people that you trust and are proven in the industry. So, Brian, always a pleasure, my man. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me. No, great. Thanks for taking your time. I mean, you educated me, and hopefully people that are watching this a little bit about the difference in the different markets. And let's just let them know how to find you and find me. And
we're gonna put the lower thirds up there, and everybody will have the information and a link to everything. And we'll be in touch. And Brian, enjoy the rest of the summer.
You too. Maybe I'll see you in Florida
soon. All right, bud.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Yeah, so we're going to have to do that over. No, I'm kidding.